Good morning.
Today's talk is, morning, Frank, is again from the Dhammapada, chapter of the Dhammapada called the Tanhavagga. Tanha is a Pali word for craving, desire. The closest literal translation is thirst, but it's all part of that idea of craving. And I guess I say this at just about every sutta, but this again gets to the heart of the matter of craving rooted in ignorance of the way things truly are, meaning ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And so the fourth noble truth is the truth of the path leading to the cessation of ignorance and the cessation of craving. And it's just another clear sutta on encouraging us as Dhamma practitioners to keep our focus where it belongs. The Buddha teaches the craving of mindless people grows like a creeper. Like a monkey seeking fruit in the forest, they leap from moment to moment, tasting the fruits of their karma. So we know what karma is. It's not just some overarching, grand, physical, spiritual system of behavior modification. It has nothing to do with that. Karma is a present moment unfolding of past intentional actions, moderated or viewed through the present level of mindfulness. And if our present level of mindfulness is well concentrated and framed by the Eightfold Path, there will be no additional karma, nothing leading towards further ignorance and further distraction. This moment then will be a moment that has a potential and maintains a potential towards awakening, towards ending ignorance. The Buddha continues, those unrefined, meaning, and this is not a harsh judgment of people that aren't practicing the Dhamma. In relation to the Dhamma, if you're not developing the Eightfold Path as it is intended, your mindfulness is unrefined, and so you are. In other words, you simply don't know what to hold in mind to have a peaceful and calm life. Those unrefined, clinging to craving, are overcome in the world. Their sorrow grows like grass after the rains. Those refined, having overcome the world, released from craving, so difficult to escape, their sorrow rolls away like water beads off a lotus, meaning that there's nothing else that we need to do to end the constant stress of ignorance except recognize and abandon ignorance. There's no other process involved. One of the significant aspects of what the Buddha is just teaching us here, again, is to keep us focused on the Eightfold Path and not look for escape or any type of salvific way of engaging in the world. Is that clear? And this is so important, and it's really the major contradiction between what the Buddha taught and nearly everything else that is taught as a way of saving ourselves in some realm, whether it's a future heaven or it's establishing ourselves in some non-physical realm that is abstractly peaceful. The Buddha's Dhamma is about awakening in this human life and living a human life to its full potential with a calm and peaceful mind. And what could be more important than human beings having a human life, but to learn how to be in it, rather than thinking that they need to do something that takes them out of it, even if it's a subtle distraction. Their sorrow rolls away like water beads off a lotus. I say to all of you, you are all fortunate indeed. As you would uproot medicinal herbs, meaning at the root, you should uproot craving. And what is the root of craving altogether? Come on, I gave you a clue just a moment ago. What's the root of ignorance? So we uproot craving at its root, ignorance of Four Noble Truths. The reference now is to Mara. Mara is a common metaphor that the Buddha uses to describe a mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths and prone to confusion, distraction, and ongoing disappointing experiences. Do not let Mara destroy you, as a raging river continually destroys reeds. Just as a tree will rise again if its roots are not cut, Any craving not rooted out will arise again and again. The mindless person, the currents of craving flowing unrestrained, are always grasping after pleasure and are swept away by the flood of their own passionate thoughts. I can't think of a more important and emphatic declaration by the Buddha. And we can, let me preface this by saying this. The Dhamma is designed so we have a framework for looking at our own life moment by moment as it's unfolding. And in this particular case, and really in the Dhamma in general, if this moment is rooted in craving, we're not in the moment, are we? We can't be. Because craving is always something that is either related to the future, I want to get something, or it's a form of craving called aversion that is conditioned by something that has occurred in the past. And so any form of tanha, any form of craving, instantly takes us away from our life in this moment. And there's no way around it. And so we have been conditioned to excuse away our craving, that it's good for us in some ways, especially if we're craving for things that we ideologically think are wholesome, whether for ourselves or for society as a whole. But the subtle problem with that is any type of craving is a self-establishment in the future. I want something to be different than it is. And as soon as we do that, as soon as that craving, that tanha, overcomes us, we're no longer present in the world. Is that clear? And it's such a simple but very subtle aspect that we miss it. And we miss it because we're always justifying craving at some level. Even if it's at that most basic level of I need to crave, I need to be holding on to something to establish myself in the world. And that that subtle fear that affects almost every Dhamma practitioner as they start developing the Eightfold Path and the Buddha's Dhamma and start realizing the implications of letting go of all self-referential views, that fear arises, well, what's going to happen to me? Aren't those self-referential views necessary for continual establishment in the world? A simple way of saying it is, isn't this type of craving and clinging to self-identity necessary to survive? And the solution, the Buddha's Dhamma, teaches us that we're not surviving by doing that. We're literally, in the Buddha's words, we're living in a state of death by ignorance. Why? Because life is only occurring in our life as our life unfolds. There's no life in the past and there's no life in the future. The exhilaration of human life is only possible right now. And that exhilaration is not a fabricated excitement. It's simply a meaningful engagement with no matter what's occurring. Is that clear? So no matter what we're feeling, whether it's incredible sadness over some tragedy that happened in our life, or extreme elation over some good fortune, our minds remain calm and balanced and present with what's occurring because we don't take any of that person. We were talking, I think it might have been last week, we got into a little bit of a discussion about just feeling sadness and feeling our feelings as they occur. And we're conditioned to not want to feel things that we have already judged as unpleasant, such as sadness or even fear. But when we simply allow those feelings to be as they are, and really, let me use a different word, have those emotions. An emotion is a judgment attached to a feeling or a thought attached to a feeling. If we simply allow those emotions to be there without the judgment and just feel it, we are living our life. And then even something as extreme sadness has an exquisite nature to it because it's what's occurring in our life. And when we decide that we want, if we condition ourselves to only want certain experiences and always be grasping after those experiences, we're missing out on these things, aren't we? We're missing out on life itself. Life is full of sadness, and it's full of elation, and it's full of fear, and it's full of courage. It's full of everything that we can imagine. But when we insist on a narrow way of living in the world, that it only be the way that I want it to be, we miss all of it. I'll continue. I could rant a little bit about that. Maybe I was, but that really is the point. There's no meaning in life in living a fabricated view, is there? Because we're fooling ourselves. We're over exaggerating things like tragedy and losing our minds over it, rather than simply being with awful things. Why? Because awful things occur. The Buddha's description of dukkha is just that. He's really reminding us is you're living in a world that is prone to experiences that are very, very difficult. The solution isn't to change the difficulties in the world. That's part of the world. The solution isn't to legislate against everything that can possibly trouble our minds. Why? Because it's impossible. The solution is to become peaceful with it and stop contributing to the general suffering in the world through ignorance. So that's the end of that rant. Understanding. The wise Dhamma practitioner cuts craving at the root. Again, the root of ignorance. Flowing in from all phenomena and sustained by craving, feelings of pleasure arise in all beings. Grasping after pleasure and satisfaction, people succumb to impermanence and decay. They succumb. What does the Buddha mean there? We succumb to impermanence and decay because that's life. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the last teaching the Buddha ever gave, he said that, I want to characterize it properly. Impermanence is relentless, or decay is relentless, meaning the human body, right now, as we're living here, moment by moment, this body is decaying. That's just the nature of human life. Just like wars and floods and rainbows and babies are part of human life, so is the decaying of a human body. But we don't want to face it because we have decided that we must continue to establish ourselves. So that one act takes us out of what's actually occurring. And it doesn't mean we should sit here and think moment by moment about this rotten, decaying body we have. It simply means to understand the nature of impermanence. And I lost my thought there a little bit. Succumbing to impermanence means just that, meaning getting caught in the fear of what's to come. We have succumbed to impermanence. What's to come is going to come. There's no reason to fear it. There's no reason to even really think about it beyond practical planning for the future. People succumb to impermanence and decay. In the Buddha's Dhamma, succumbing means losing our minds over it.
So instead, you should just be present with the decay?
We kind of talked about it a little earlier, being present with decay. And it's not pleasant. But because we've learned that life isn't supposed to be always pleasant or always the way we want it to be, we can actually, I don't want to say gain pleasure. We can be present with the aging process or any other process without the need for it to be any different. And that changes everything, doesn't it? Excuse me. In order to see ourselves clearly in relation to the world, so now I'm getting into the idea of the three marks of existence and the confusion that comes from attaching the self to impermanent objects, events, and ideas. When we can stay present with life as life occurs, there's none of that I-making, is there? We freed ourselves from the burden of wrong views of self. And again, as I stated earlier, then every moment in life is meaningful and purposeful. We don't need it to be any different than it is. Overwhelmed by craving, the fool chases pleasure like a caged rabbit looking for escape. Bound to the world by greed, aversion, and deluded thinking, they give rise to suffering forever. Bound to the world by greed, aversion, and deluded thinking. Overwhelmed by craving, the fool chases pleasure like a rabbit caught in a snare. Those that strive to abandon passion will destroy craving.
That's the one I didn't understand. Go through that one.
Those that strive to abandon passion will destroy craving.
With the rabbit in the snare.
Oh, well, remember the Nagara Sutta where the Buddha describes the feedback loop of his own thinking, ignorant thinking rooted in constant self-referential views, name and form?
Yeah.
That's describing a rabbit caught in a snare, isn't it? We're the rabbit, and we've created the snare on our own minds by our own views, ignorant of Four Noble Truths. We've set the trap for ourselves.
We're tied down by this snare and we're trying to jump away from it. We're trying to escape it.
Yes, another word for snare that we use a lot is a yoke, meaning being tied to that ignorance. Does that clear it up for you?
I get the yoke. I didn't.
The metaphor of
The
the snare.
trap of the snare and things. That's just panic to me. It's not
And
related
that's
to
exactly
that.
what it is, the panic.
Yeah, and
Should panic you.
that's it. That's right. The panic is reflected in constant craving, isn't it? I'm terrified that I'm going to lose myself. So I'm always craving after something that I feel I need to be happy or safe or secure or whatever it might be. And that is the trap that we've set. And expanding the metaphor a little bit larger than that, the world itself is a trap when we don't understand what's occurring. Or maybe a more accurate way of is our entanglements in the world. Self-identifying with objects, events, views, and ideas is the trap. And think of it that way. When I insist that I need something to always be happy or safe or secure, and I also have no control over that to a great extent, it feels like a trap, isn't it? What am I going to do next? How do I maintain this? And that's that subtle stress of I-making that's always there. I-making is a trap, rooted in craving. Does that clear it up?
Yeah.
It's a great question and great comment.
All of his images in this sutta are like so spot on.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen a rabbit caught in the snare or by his leg. It's not a pretty sight, but the thing is just completely panicky, but keeps, getting help.
And what's the rabbit trying to do when he's in that? He's grasping after escape, isn't he?
Yeah.
It's the perfect metaphor for what happens to us when our minds are rooted in ignorance. We're always grasping after escape. In fact, most philosophical systems are presented that way. This is your escape from your problem, rather than understanding the problem and solving it or resolving it for yourself. And continue. Those that strive to abandon passion will destroy craving. There are those that abandon worldly entanglements and turn to my Dhamma, and though free, run back to the bondage. So that's a rather harsh way of saying just giving up on the Dhamma, but as a Sangha, we've seen that here, haven't we? And the Buddha recognized it during his time. Even though people were learning the Dhamma directly from the Buddha himself during his lifetime, they weren't willing to let go of craving. They wanted more, and they wanted nothing of this. Once free, they run back to the same old chains. The wise know that clinging to iron, wood, or hemp is easier to cut than infatuation with jewels, ornaments, children, or spouses. This is the bond that is elastic, constraining, and hard to cut. It is the nature of a deluded mind to value arbitrary and impermanent objects, some more than others. The more value, meaning clinging one places on an object, the more potential for continued distraction and stress is present. The wise cut even these bonds. The wise abandon sensual pleasures and calmly renounce the world. Those infatuated by desire are stuck in the swirling river of the current of ignorance, like a spider stuck in its own web. Another great metaphor. The wise Dhamma practitioner cuts this off at its root. Having abandoned craving, they abandon all suffering and are free of worldly entanglements. Release the past, release the future, release the present. So Lorna brought this up earlier, and she said, what is that? Aren't we supposed to be in the present? That's not exactly how you put it. But it is confusing, isn't it? Isn't the Dhamma supposed to have us focus on the present and forget the past and the future? Well, this one line given 2,600 years ago points to the myth of the power, and I'm not putting one person down, even though he wrote a book related to what I'm about to say. It puts a lie to the idea of the power of now, because this modern religion of the present moment that we've created is simply another distraction. A human being cannot isolate a now moment. It's simply not possible. But what a human being can do through the Dhamma is to be present in that continuum of moment by moment life unfolding. It's craving that has us grasping after something called the present moment. But if it's craving that is motivating us toward being in the present moment, where is that present moment? It's always coming up, isn't it? And so the mindless notion that I need to be in this present moment is itself a distraction from the present moment. Letting go of those, as the Buddha would put it, foolish notions, and developing a profoundly well-concentrated mind framed by the Eightfold Path, you are naturally present with your life as your life unfolds, without doing anything distracting to be there. You're simply in your body for what's occurring. Is that clear?
Yeah.
That's the essence of the Dhamma. That's the culmination of the Dhamma, is a mind united with its body, and it is maintained in that body by understanding, not by manipulation, and not by any trance-like state, such as establishment in non-physical realms or in ideologies that mask the fact that we're not present anymore. Release the future, release the present. Cross over to the farther shore of existence. With a mind wholly liberated, you will no longer give birth to another moment rooted in the living death of ignorance. I'm not going to get into it, but that's an authentic teaching on rebirth. It's what we're giving birth to in this moment is what's most important. For a person who is tormented by their own deluded thoughts, overcome by passion for the pursuit of pleasure, their craving only grows stronger indeed. Those who delight in overcoming delusion, that's us, who is always mindful, who abandons greed, aversion, and deluded thinking, will end craving by recognizing and abandoning ignorance. Again, that's the whole essence of the Dhamma. Those fearless, free of craving, having overcome passion for the world, who has plucked the thorns of ignorance, there will be no further becoming. Does everybody know what that means? There's no further becoming. There's reference in the dependent origination in the Paticca-Samuppada Sutta and throughout the Buddha's Dhamma in different suttas about the idea of becoming, and there's hardly ever a qualifier or an explanation of what the Buddha means by becoming, but when you understand the overarching context, in fact, the original context of dependent origination, that the Buddha used those words translated from the Pali. The problem of a mind rooted in ignorance and prone to ignore its own ignorance can only, in the moment, become further ignorant and has no frame of reference to escape its own ignorance. But when we use the Eightfold Path as it's intended to interrupt our own ignorance, to recognize it and abandon it, then each moment becomes a moment that we can become awakening. And that in that moment is the most important teaching on rebirth. And it's something we can consider ourselves. If what I'm holding in mind is going to give birth to another moment rooted in ignorance and prone to confusion, delusion, and suffering, and I recognize that because of the Eightfold Path, now I can change it. But and as the Buddha said, but I'm also free to ignore it and continue my own ignorance. Or I can practice wise restraint at the point of contact, meaning in my life as my life is occurring, and incline my mind towards awakening. When I introduce the principles of the Four Noble Truths and reality into what's occurring, I can now move my mind towards awakening, towards that goal of a calm and peaceful mind no matter what's occurring, towards the goal of being actually present with our life as our life unfolds. Those free of craving and clinging, perfectly understanding the truth of my Dhamma and the proper context, will indeed be free of ignorance. That's so important, the proper context. The proper context allows us to keep well focused and not grasp after ideas and ideologies that may seem useful to attach ourselves to and maybe cling our Dhamma practice to, but they're simply abstractions when you look at it, and they can only further confuse us, further distract us. They are profoundly wise, a great person. Through right knowledge, the Buddha is now talking about himself, through right knowledge, I have conquered the world. I am free of clinging. Through abandoning ignorance, I am free of craving. I have comprehended this by myself. The Buddha is saying this not to elevate himself or put himself above other people. He always held himself as simply another human being. And if he could do it, we all can do it. I have comprehended this by myself. Who would I call my teacher? The gift of the Dhamma is foremost. The taste of the Dhamma is foremost. Delight in the Dhamma is foremost. Free of craving ends all suffering. Riches ruin only the fool, not the wise Dhamma practitioner. It's not to say that if we happen to have riches, we're in trouble. It's clinging to those riches. There's nothing wrong with having a big pile of gold as long as you're not using it to identify yourself. Riches ruin only the fool, not the wise Dhamma practitioner seeking nibbana. The fool ruins themselves as well as others. Look at the world. Weeds destroy fields as craving ruins humanity. Again, look at the world. And this is something the Buddha said 2,600 years ago that most of us would think are a much simpler time. I mean, I hear it often that the Four Noble Truths are no longer, and these are from people who don't really know what the Four Noble Truths are about, but they're no longer applicable because the world is so different now than it was 2,600 years ago. It's not. The exact same problems that are present in the world today that we're so hyper aware of are the same problems that we had 2,600 years ago. They might be grander in scale, but that's only because our egos are grander in scale.
Excuse me, is this from the Pali Canon or from the other?
Well, this is from the Dhammapada. The Dhammapada is part, it's a great question. The Dhammapada is part of the Pali Canon, and it's actually part of the second book of the Pali Canon that are the preserved teachings of the Buddha. And so the Dhammapada is part of a fifth book in that second section called the Khuddaka Nikaya, which is, it's a collection of five books of shorter teachings. And the Dhammapada is a collection of 26 chapters, relatively short chapters, mostly in verse, although my translations aren't, they're not holding much fidelity to verse. And this entire volume, it's said, was probably put together, again, after the Buddha's death, but as a training manual for novices. And when you read it, I'm going to publish the Dhammapada in probably, I say in a couple of months, which means in 3 years. It'll be out, and it's just a wonderful book to just kind of read. You know, if you're looking for something, you're tired of reruns of Law and Order, you can read. I say that because years ago I used to be addicted to reruns of Law and Order. Weeds destroy fields as craving ruins humanity. I know I said that again. Craving. Now, again, look at the problems in the world, and not that it's not overly simplifying the problems in the world by saying they're all rooted in craving, aren't they? And the craving's manifestation of greed, aversion, and ongoing deluded thinking. It's all rooted in that. And all of that is rooted in ignorance. And that's why I say the most loving thing, if we really care about the world around us, and I would say everyone in this room does, and most human beings do, the most loving and effective thing we can do is to take to the Dhamma and awaken, so that we're not contributing our own ignorance to the world's ignorance. On a very subtle level, that's the most responsible thing we can do. And I don't mean to use that as browbeating or anything, just to emphasize the point, because we all care. And again, unless there's something pathologically wrong, and that's very rare, unless there's something pathologically wrong with us, compassion for others is a natural human trait, isn't it? It's often obscured by ignorance, or we often don't want to acknowledge it. In our society, men are taught that a certain level of compassion is okay, but not too much, or you're not a man anymore. I mean, it's just ridiculous little signals. But I think women people are taught that on a very subtle level. We need to be tough. We need to be awake. We need to be supple. We need to be calm and at peace. We need to be free of conflict. And if I can do it for myself, then I can contribute that, even if it's only as an example to the world. But if I don't, some, not all of my decisions, but some can only contribute to the ignorance in the world. Just makes sense, doesn't it? Weeds destroy fields as craving ruins humanity. Therefore, what is offered to others free of craving yields abundant fruit. And what is the Buddha teaches that generosity is one of the Brahma Viharas, the exalted mind states. And then he says the greatest gift we can give anyone is a gift of the authentic true Dhamma. What is offered to others free of craving yields abundant fruit. End of the chapter. I was the end of the sutta. Isn't it remarkable in how it simply gets right to the heart of the matter? And again, you can say that about just about every sutta. But this encourages us to really focus on that and recognize we all can recognize the very obvious forms of craving, such as I need another piece of chocolate cake or whatever it might be. I need another encounter of like one that was just so pleasurable, etc. But it's the more subtle levels of craving that we are able to recognize through a well-concentrated mind framed by the Eightfold Path. And by that I mean the craving that is inherent in every single thought, every single self-referential thought for continued self-establishment. And that's the very subtle levels of I-making that the Dhamma develops within us. You talk about this often, Lorna. Somewhat maybe different terms, but not often. This is at the point of contact. That's why I keep saying that. Restraint, wise restraint, is practice at the point of contact and at the point of craving, or it's the other side of that same coin. It's cousin aversion. So it's craving. Aversion is simply craving for something to be different than it is. But it's important to point that out because usually craving, we associate with craving towards something that is pleasurable. But craving is craving. Craving is wanting something to be different than it is, whether it's more of something or less of something. And it's the root of all of our troubles because it's all rooted in ignorance. So let's go around the room. But since Frank is online, we'll start with Frank. How are you, Frank?
Good. Good morning to everyone. Good to
Good
be
morning, Frank.
Good morning, and good to be with everyone this morning. I'm really enjoying these Dhammapada teachings. I know you started them on Thursday in January, and this gets right to the point. And I mean, what I really took from this sutta was the karma that is all wrapped up in contact with craving, and it's realizing, being awake is realizing for me that point of contact and craving, and to uproot craving, it's simple to abandon the ignorance and of the four truths, and that's pretty simple for me to get right to cut to the chase, So I'm going to go back and read this and re-listen to it again because I was distracted here at home, a couple things going on. But I really appreciate the teachings and the Sangha and what you do here, John. So thank you.
Thank you, Frank. I'm glad you could join us today, and I'll get this posted probably later on today or this afternoon, so you can hear it again. I'm glad you joined us today.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jen.
Morning. The not clinging to the present moment part, little kind of discussion that you elaborated on was, I felt like a interesting way of pointing out how we can recognize anatta arising. Because once we have that kind of thought or experience of saying, I'm really enjoying this moment, then I'm making. Sort of like, rather than just enjoying it, once you kind of have that.
Once you recognize that it's gone, you realize that I feel the same way.
Yeah, like once you see yourself attaching or making a judgment about the present moment, you're no longer, now you're clinging.
Yes.
Yes.
Right? I
Yes.
mean, it's not like you're clinging, but you have the potential to
You want
cling.
it last.
Yeah, or if you grab onto that kind of reaction of, wow, I'm experiencing this. As soon as you step into that kind of headspace, you're now observing and judging the present moment rather than experiencing it. And so there's this opportunity to kind of watch yourself make that judgment and then kind of run with the judgment, or make the judgment and just let it kind of fall away and recognize that was anatta. That makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. You're going to be a good teacher. Jen's doing a teacher thing. No, because you're seeing that very subtle level of eye making there. While you were talking, I was thinking about the levels of jhana.
Yeah.
And the second, jhana means concentration. There's 4 levels of jhana. We've done a lot of talks on that, and we will again. The second level of jhana is recognizing directed thought and evaluation, and as it falls away. And that's a practical experience that we develop during meditation that we can carry into this occurrence, that I'm directing my thoughts and I'm evaluating the pleasure that I'm having, and I'm attaching myself to it. The next level of jhana is what you're then describing. If we find ourselves caught up in that desire, to recognize the eye making, practice restraint, and the third level of jhana is where we'll find ourselves at that moment, which is free of directed thought and evaluation. So we still might be scarfing down that chocolate cake, but it's just scarfing down chocolate cake.
Right.
Do you see? It's very subtle, and that might not be I should probably stop. I come up with a different metaphor. Because it's not, especially if you like chocolate cake, it's hard to get past that. Anything that we are craving for in the present moment is no longer in the present moment. Because of the craving, we've split our minds to the past, meaning it might just be that moment that I had of that one moment ago, that bite of chocolate cake. But because of craving, my mind isn't in the present. It's focused on the next bite of chocolate cake. Or it might be I had enough chocolate cake and apple pie would be good next. Or an endless list of, now that I'm done with this, with right now, with this, with grasping myself onto this, Well, now my mind, since it's always grasping, always craving, always full of Tanha, there's no lasting peace in this, because now I need something else. And I'm, again, out of my mind. It's literally true to say I'm out of my mind when I'm not present with where my mind is, isn't it? So it's an excellent insight, Jen. Thank you. Becky.
So, if at that moment of contact, you have a welling up of joy, you don't consider that at all in any way?
Oh, you should consider it entirely without the need for it to be any different than it is. Meaning, it's just experience. There's nothing wrong with in fact, there's everything right with experiencing what's occurring, including an appropriate feeling. But to have an appropriate
have a welling up of joy, and you merely, not merely, of course, when you have a welling up of joy, it's pleasant. You don't take it personally.
yes, meaning
Or you just let it be.
Well,
You just
watch
experience it.
whatever's happening. Even if you do react to the joy, if you do see yourself go, oh, I'm having
wow,
joy,
this
then
is
you
wonderful.
then
Yeah.
you recognize that and you say, oh, Lord, I'm now making a judgment about the joy.
yeah,
Let me try to just experience,
Let
or
me try to
whatever,
just
whatever.
experience.
Just maybe,
But-
yeah.
This has to stay. I cannot go.
Yeah.
If I just keep still and wait, will it
It's
stay?
just that.
well,
What can I
that's
do to
clinging,
hold
isn't
on to
it?
When
Yeah.
you're doing it right, what happens? I guess that's like.
Well, it is, but Becky, you're bringing up another very good point. It's a subtle form of
This is,
a mind trying to maintain ignorance of Four Noble Truths that
right.
that
I see
that
it.
generates
I see it
those
now.
questions.
I see it now. Yeah, I do. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because what you're kind of saying to you, this is not a judgment
No,
on
it's
you.
okay. Yeah.
The problem is that we feel that we need to make something personal and make it mine,
Okay.
rather than it's just an aspect. It's like holding somebody else's baby. You know what could be more joyful than that?
Yes.
But you're not attached to it because it's not your baby. It's just a wonderful experience.
That's a great analogy right there.
Yeah, or a puppy. But-
Yeah.
Hi, kitten, too.
and so
I really do see what I just did. That's
Yeah.
very good. Very much. Yeah. Okay.
well, and it's remarkable that you saw it,
Yeah.
because again, these are the subtle aspects of the Dhamma that bring realization. It's not feelings and thoughts. Let me take this back to the beginning of the Sattva-Vipassana Sutta. The Buddha teaches us in meditation that as feelings arise and pass away and thoughts arise and pass away, simply acknowledge it. Again, that's training for the feeling of joy that's arising in this moment. It's just arising and it's passing away. Why attach to it? But it doesn't mean we shouldn't experience it. It's a mind rooted in ignorance that say, oh, look at this. That bald guy won't even let me enjoy anything. But it's just the opposite, isn't it? Because we can truly enjoy everything that occurs, whether it's something that we see as joyful or painful, because it's simply what's occurring. And that doesn't mean we should strive after something painful just to have a life experience, although that is the form of asceticism that the Buddha tried. That severe asceticism is just that. Let me bring so much pain into my life. It just doesn't work. It's the same thing. Grasping after pain for liberation is the same thing as grasping after pleasure for satisfaction. It doesn't work. And it doesn't work because it's, again, to look at it religious, because it's immoral or sinful. It simply doesn't work. There's no religious or moral connotations about it. But we live moral and ethical lives simply because That's how a mind that is free of craving lives, or a person free of craving lives. Great class. Good morning.
Well, we've covered an awful lot this morning. I don't know where to begin. Just to get back to how I often try not to get caught up in life is it rises and it passes away.
Yeah.
And if you can hang on to that thought, it explains so much about life.
Yeah.
And about your thoughts about life and the discontent we have about life. It's all kind of wrapped up in everything arises and everything is impermanent and it passes away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my grounding. And then today you just said, which is almost comical. You were explaining, and it was one of those times you were just upliving what you were thinking, that you don't have to add to anything more to the moment because you're already here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. What could we add to the moment?
As I say, when you get that thought, it's almost comical.
It is.
But we do it all the time.
When you the notion that we as human beings are always craving is when you look at it is so completely absurd.
Yeah.
What are you craving after?
Because you're already here.
You're already there.
It's kind of like worrying about the future. It can't happen in the present. It's in the future.
Yeah.
So why worry about it? Because it's not happening now. It can't.
Yeah,
It cannot happen now.
and that's any thought. And again, there's somebody's going to say, well, aren't you supposed to pay your mortgage on the first of the month? That's got nothing to do with this.
Right.
That's just the mind looking to find something why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Thinking about tomorrow morning, I'm going to pick up my new Ferrari. I'm not. Even if tomorrow I actually go pick up my new Ferrari or my new Volkswagen, in the moment, that's a complete fabrication, isn't it? Why? Because it's in the future. It's not what's occurring right now. Now, in my coming up to the fact that I'm picking up a new Ferrari tomorrow means I've done some things to prepare for that. But the thought in this moment is a fabrication of what I'm doing tomorrow. Rather than just be present with what's occurring, it doesn't mean I won't have a thought that tomorrow at 9 o'clock I got to be at the dealership. That's just a practical thought. But if I'm continually worried that I hope my alarm goes off and my old junker doesn't break down and there's not a fire on all the rest of it, that's out of the moment. That's directed thought and evaluation. That's caught up in this negative view of self that something's going to happen to me that I don't want. It's all fabrication, isn't it? None of it is based in reality. Even if a year ago when you were going to pick up your Ferrari, something happened and you couldn't do it. That's a conditioned thought that you're bringing into the present moment. You're stuck in the past again. And that mind that is stuck in the past is forcing you into the future. Again, you're out of your body. And it's rooted in that craving. Wow, what a good class. Good morning, Eva.
John. Grateful to have so much to feed on and absorb and understand. I get caught up a lot in that whole thing of, okay, so am I using this time to make a decision and using practical information that I'm putting together to try to make a decision, or am I just catastrophizing and clinging and having aversion towards having to make a decision? And so it's kind of confusing because I just can't figure out what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. So sometimes I think I hold on to, like, I have to make a decision, and then I think, well, yeah, so the last time I did go pick up my Ferrari, I was caught in a fire and blah, 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 in order to make this decision. So am I then at this time, how do I not then allow that memory to affect me so that I get so caught up in the memory of that I can't even make the decision now?
So that memory is just that. In fact, we know, we talked about this earlier, that you can't rely on memory at all. because it's always, memories are the most malleable thing in our minds, because we're always going to adjust the memory to fit what we want or where we think we're going. That there, and probably in our lifetime, we're not going to have in courts, we won't have those types of witnesses, because we know that memories, and it's really being challenged a lot. You know, that any good defense lawyer, the first thing they go after is people's memory, and they show that you can't rely on anybody's memory. You know, we know that 4 people see an accident and 4 people see it completely different. It's the same thing. So relying on our memories in the present moment to figure out how we're going to live in the future, again, is foolish, isn't it? They're completely unreliable. But because we've attached ourselves to our thoughts and our memories, that's enough to give our memories validity. And even if it's an accurate memory of what's occurring, what occurred in the past, it occurred in the past. And so if last year when I went to pick up my Ferrari, I got caught in a flood and I never made it there, if I conditioned myself to by attaching, by overreacting to that a year ago, I'm going to have fear right now that something else is going to stop me from getting my Ferrari tomorrow, isn't it? That's just conditioned thinking. It's not based in reality. It's based on something that I've conditioned myself to believe in. Is that I mean, that's again, the essence of craving. So, thank you. Ram, good to see you.
I like this more than others of the Dhammapada. His metaphors and his the pictures that he paints in here are just so vivid and so clear. Sometimes he comes up with metaphors that are like, this one. This was very, very clear. I think because he's dealing with the root causes.
Thank you. Good morning, Tim. Good to see you this morning.
Morning, everybody. First, Jen, I didn't mean to interrupt when you were saying, but when you said something, you kind of woke me up.
Yeah.
That's the idea here.
I experienced that recently, and one thing that when I think of the term, when we talk about aversion, you know, when we think about physical pain and how that is the analogy I like to use is a constant, like a room that's safe and a door full of crazy zombies trying to get in. And then when they get in, this aversion, the pain that adds to the dukkha, it is the dukkha. To live in that moment is terrifying. To live in that moment of those brief moments of bliss or joy, you don't want to let it go because it's pleasant, whereas the other one's not. And so it's hard for this sutta is just amazing because it touched on all the reasons why.
Yeah.
To live in that moment of being in pain, emotional or physical, it would really be such a wonderful thing to be able to live in that moment and get beyond it and accept it fully as it is part of our life as we get older in life. Yeah. And so this sutta, to me, really clarified a lot of those things, a lot of those self-referential thoughts of the past. You know, when we think about when I live in the present, to me, it's a lot easier to know that the future is ahead. It's coming. But it's really insanity to really let that past get to you because it's already happened.
Yeah.
So the sutta, I really want to study this sutta because it really is a relief to when you fully grasp it.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Your understanding is just as it should be. That in the metaphors you used, the zombies coming in, the fear that's the zombies are going to get me. is in the, I can't remember if it's a Loka or the Bhava Sutta, the Buddha states that where there's desire, there's fear. Where there's craving, there's fear. And so the underlying feeling of the zombies coming in or losing what's pleasurable is still fear, isn't it? And it's still rooted in grasping. So whether in fact, using the idea of something imagined as zombies are not real, but the feeling is real, isn't it? If we really believe that there's zombies coming to get us, whether it's based in reality or not, the fear is real. We've conjured that up in our own mind, just as much as the fear of losing what's giving me pleasure right now is the same fabrication. And why do I say that? Even though the subjects are different, the underlying cause is the same. It's bringing up the fear. And so that can happen to, and it does, it happens to any and every phenomena that arises and passes away if there's craving present. Bring up, great point. Thank you. Good morning, Lisa. How are you? Good to see you.
Fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
I think we always say in the Jewish, it's great to be here, great to hear what everyone has to say, and I like everyone's analogies. They're all personal to them and overlapping. Well, since you always bring up cake, chocolate cake, the idea, that expression, to have your cake and eat it too, I think that's the sort of like the very antithesis of this, of what we're trying to do. All of it. So I never really knew what that meant. And I know it's simple, but I never really thought about it. And so I finally realized, I guess this is what it is that, you know, there's a piece of cake and you eat it, you don't have it anymore. So you still want it to be there. And anyway, that's just like the whole opposite of, you know, of how really to think about things.
Yeah.
So when I read that, it's clinging, craving, and what's the third thing? Or
aversion?
Okay, yeah, aversion. They all refer to the past and the future. You want to, if you're clinging to an idea, it's something that you want to happen again. That happened and you want it to happen again. So that's past and future. Craving, same thing. And aversion, same thing. And
Same thing.
These things will just, you know, bury you under all that stuff.
If your mind is unrestrained, yes.
And there's the only way out is to just be in the moment and be accepting. Tim referred to something about getting older, but I don't know whether part of this is just getting older and more relaxed about things and more accepting that this is where I am and I really can't change anything. But I think it's also just hearing this over and over and realizing the total wisdom of it.
Yeah.
How amazing it is. And then integrating that. You know, you hear something over and over in these words.
Yeah.
Integrating it little by little. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you. It is wonderful. It said that the Buddha gave 84,000 discourses, teachings, and that it's a number that means a lot. That's all. Nobody really knows. But he said essentially the same thing 84,000 times. Repetition is a key to this, you know, and a mind rooted in grasping after ever more romantic, meaning ever more novel, new ideas, doesn't want that, doesn't want repetition. It's boring. It's an aspect of concentration. And you were talking about that, using the chocolate cake in a very general way, but a good description of the word dukkha is disappointment or unsatisfactory experiences. So if I'm craving for that piece of chocolate cake and I finished it, it's gone, there's nothing left, there's not even a speck left on my plate, and I want more, the satisfaction that would have been in enjoying that piece of cake is now lost, isn't it? By greed, by craving. And it's just that way. It in the grand scheme of things, wanting another piece of chocolate cake doesn't mean anything, does it? Except to my own level of contentment. And again, using something that is seemingly insignificant to make the point, but we do that with everything, don't we? It's never enough. It's the nature of a self-referential ego self rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths to constantly be stuck in Tanha, to always be grasping after more.
It's interesting, you know, the two arrows. Well, when you were talking, something just occurred to me, is that it's sort of like a version of it, but one is, it's fine to enjoy chocolate cake.
Yep.
I'm going to enjoy every bite. You know, that's wonderful. But then, you know, you're done, you don't have it anymore, and it's, you know, it's not enough. So then you're kind of piercing yourself with the arrow. It's not like the 2 hours. It's more like something's wonderful. We'll just enjoy it for being wonderful. And then don't say, well, I don't have it anymore, you know? And so then you have that arrow ruining everything. It's just what you said.
Yeah. And it's all rooted in craving, isn't it? Wanting more. Thank you. Amy, good to see you this morning.
You too. Thank you. I'm listening.
I'm glad you're here. Good morning, Jay.
Good morning. I'm kind of in more of a listening mode than I am philosophizing. I just figure it's like when you're down the shore and a big wave creams you and you're tossed around by fate, you know, by the Four Noble Truths. You can't avoid that stuff. You know? But I'm a clinger and a craver, as most people know. You know, I like having a gin and tonic this time of year in the afternoon. And, you know, simple pleasures like that. I think that if you can't enjoy them, you know, you're missing out on the easy stuff in life, you know, because the bad stuff sure as hell comes and gets you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with enjoying an afternoon gin and tonic.
Yeah.
Nothing at all.
And the other thing I just wanted to say is I hope everybody has peace of mind for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
I wish.
Well, I think you bring up another good point. It's a perhaps a skillful wish, but we don't have to wish for it. We can develop it ourselves. Good morning, Becky.
Good morning, John. Really nice to be here. I had liked this sutta a lot, and during the discussion today, had a couple of nice insights that moved me a little bit more closer to the path. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Glad you're here. Good morning, Kevin. Good to see you.
Great to be here. It really is a profound sutta. It's so subtle in its ways and so profound. There's, you know, one, I guess, sticking point, you know, and he talks about bonds that are light and bonds that are heavy chains, and those heavy chains are, I think he says, jewels and something else, and children and spouse.
Yeah.
And in a way, to me, that's sort of like children and spouses.
Yeah, right.
How do we abandon children and spouse?
Well, I got it.
Way, you don't. I mean, it's almost like the riches. You can have riches as long as you don't cling to riches. You can have a spouse and have children as long as you don't cling.
Yep.
But it's a very difficult thing.
Yeah,
That's my chocolate cake.
Yeah, well, that's why the Buddha points it out, because it is much more difficult, those things that we hold most dear. Talked about this a couple of weeks ago too. With the Buddha's not saying you have to abandon your spouse and children or even your jewels. He's simply saying don't crave after them or cling to them. And that's a pretty good teachings on being a good parent, isn't it? You know, not being overbearing. That's what I'm talking about. You know, so if
realizing as you're parenting that this is changing constantly.
Yeah.
Nothing actually, to me, nothing taught me more about impermanence than parenting.
Yeah.
Minute to minute.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, that's just a practical example of that, isn't it? The oh, that's enough for today. I almost went on to another one, but I won't. Tuesday's class is again going to be on the Dhammapada, I think the 19th chapter. But the whole book, that whole section is really just like that. There are 26 very pithy, very powerful teachings on mostly specific topics. Some of them have a couple intertwined in them. It's just a great read. All right, let's finish with metta as we always do. So find your relaxed meditation posture and take a moment to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath, establishing jhana. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class this morning. Thank you for joining, Frank. Peace.
Have a good day.
You too, my friend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you soon.